The aluminum tent poles gleamed silver against 50 years of mountain debris. Park Ranger Sarah Chen crouched beside the exposed fabric, her breath forming clouds in the March air as she realized what the recent landslide had revealed. 5 pristine camping tents, their orange nylon as vibrant as the day they were pitched. This discovery would reopen one of Appalachian America's most haunting cold cases. The morning of March 15th, 2025 began like any other spring cleanup in Shenandoah National Park. Chen had been assigned to assess storm damage along the remote White Oak Canyon Trail when she spotted the unnatural geometry jutting from the fresh scree. What she found defied every assumption about the Blackwood Five, a group of University of Virginia students who had vanished without a trace in October 1975. The tents sat in a perfect circle, each entrance facing inward. But something was wrong. Every single flap had been sealed shut with crude, irregular stitching. Thick fishing line, the kind used for deep-sea angling, had been woven through the fabric with surgical precision, creating an impenetrable barrier. Chen's radio crackled to life as she called for backup, her voice steady despite the chill crawling up her spine. Within hours, the site swarmed with investigators, forensic teams, and Park Service officials. What they discovered inside those tents would challenge everything they thought they knew about the case that had haunted the Blue Ridge Mountains for half a century. Inside each tent, curled in fetal positions around vintage camera tripods, lay the remains of 5 young people. The bodies showed no signs of trauma, no evidence of struggle. They appeared to have simply stopped. But it was the cameras that held the real mystery. 4 of the 5 vintage Nikon F cameras contained exposed film, remarkably preserved by the mountain's cool, dry conditions. When developed at the FBI's Quantico laboratory, the images revealed the students' final day in stunning detail. Hiking shots, camp setup, smiling faces around a fire, normal documentation of what should have been a routine backpacking trip, until the final frame on Rebecca Martinez's camera. The last photograph, time-stamped October 23, 1975 at 11:47 p.m., showed something that shouldn't exist in nature. A perfect ring of white lights hovering above the tree line, each orb roughly the size of a street lamp, suspended in formation against the star-filled sky. The exposure was clean, no camera shake, no double imaging. Whatever Rebecca had photographed, it had remained stationary long enough for a crisp, detailed shot. But why had they sewn themselves inside their tents? Who had the fishing line? And what had they seen that final night that made 5 experienced hikers choose such a bizarre form of shelter? The original 1975 investigation had concluded the students simply got lost and succumbed to the elements. Their families had grieved. The university had implemented new safety protocols, and the case had faded into local legend. But now, with physical evidence that contradicted every official theory, investigators faced an uncomfortable truth. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from and what time it is there. We love connecting with viewers around the world. And if this story has already grabbed your attention, hit that like button and subscribe, because what we're about to uncover gets much darker. The Blackwood Five weren't just lost hikers. They were witnesses to something so extraordinary, or so terrifying, that they had deliberately trapped themselves inside their tents, choosing isolation over whatever waited outside in the Appalachian darkness. Dr. James Morrison, the forensic anthropologist assigned to examine the remains, made another disturbing discovery. The fishing line used to seal the tents wasn't available commercially in 1975. The specific polymer blend and tensile strength didn't hit the market until 1982. 7 years after the students vanished. Someone had visited those tents long after the Blackwood Five had died. What had they been protecting the bodies from? And why go to such elaborate lengths to preserve evidence of that final, impossible photograph? The investigation was about to uncover secrets that certain people had spent decades trying to bury. Rebecca Martinez adjusted her pack straps one final time as the morning fog lifted from the Shenandoah Valley. The crisp scent of autumn leaves mixed with pine needles, while frost crunched beneath her hiking boots. October in the Blue Ridge Mountains promised perfect conditions for what should have been a routine 3-day expedition. These 5 students were about to become the center of Virginia's most enduring mystery. The Blackwood Five weren't typical college kids looking for weekend adventure. Rebecca Martinez, a senior geology major, had earned her wilderness certification 2 summers running trail maintenance in Yellowstone. David Chen, no relation to the ranger who would find them 50 years later, was pursuing his doctorate in atmospheric physics and carried specialized equipment for measuring electromagnetic fields in remote locations. Sarah Kim had spent her teenage years as a competitive orienteer, capable of navigating by stars when compasses failed. Then there was Marcus Thompson, a photography student whose vintage Nikon F had already captured award-winning images across 3 national parks. His girlfriend, Jenny Walsh, rounded out the group, a psychology major who documented their adventures in detailed journals that would later become crucial evidence. Their plan was methodical and conservative. 3 days hiking the established White Oak Canyon circuit, with planned stops at designated campsites. They'd filed proper permits, left detailed itineraries with campus security, and carried enough supplies for 5 days, standard safety protocol that should have brought them home by October 26th. But on October 23rd, the group made a decision that would define their fate. Archive entry, October 23, 1975, 2:47 p.m., Jenny Walsh's journal, recovered 2025. Dave's instruments are going crazy. The electromagnetic readings don't match anything in his textbooks. Rebecca thinks there might be mineral deposits worth investigating. We're going off trail for a few hours. Should be back to the main route by sunset. The deviation seemed minor, a short detour to investigate what David's equipment had detected roughly 2 miles northeast of their planned route. According to Jenny's journal, the readings suggested unusual geological activity that could support Rebecca's senior thesis on Appalachian mineral composition. What they found instead was something that defied every scientific framework they carried. Local weather stations recorded nothing unusual that evening. Temperature held steady at 42 degrees, wind patterns remained consistent, and barometric pressure showed no significant fluctuations. Yet something in that remote section of forest had triggered electromagnetic signatures that David's sensitive equipment classified as impossible under current atmospheric models. Jenny's final journal entry, time-stamped 11:15 p.m., contained only 4 words. They're beautiful but wrong. But who were they? And what made 5 experienced outdoor enthusiasts, people trained to handle unexpected situations, choose to seal themselves inside their tents rather than simply pack up and hike back to safety? The answer might lie in a detail that investigators in 1975 either missed or deliberately ignored. When the original search teams combed the area where the students were supposed to have camped, they found something that didn't appear in any official reports. A series of shallow depressions in the forest floor, arranged in a perfect circle roughly 30 feet in diameter. Each depression was approximately 6 inches deep and 2 feet wide, as if heavy objects had been placed there for an extended period. The soil samples showed unusual mineral content, high concentrations of rare earth elements that typically required deep mining operations to extract. Something had landed there. Local residents knew to avoid that section of forest, though few would explain why. The Blackwood Five, being outsiders, had no knowledge of the unwritten rules that kept Shenandoah locals away from certain remote areas after dark. They had walked directly into something that the mountains had been hiding for decades. The helicopter blades chopped through morning air thick with mist and desperation. Sheriff Bill Hawkins pressed his face against the window, scanning endless green canopy for any flash of orange fabric. But the Appalachian wilderness kept its secrets locked beneath ancient trees. The search for the Blackwood Five would become the largest manhunt in Shenandoah County history. By October 27, 1975, panic had settled over the University of Virginia campus like a heavy blanket. The students were 2 days overdue, their last known contact, a routine check-in from White Oak Canyon's visitor center. Campus security had already notified the National Park Service, triggering protocols that would mobilize over 200 volunteers within 48 hours. Sheriff Hawkins coordinated the operation from a makeshift command post at the canyon's entrance. The search grid covered 12 square miles of dense forest, broken into sections assigned to teams of experienced outdoorsmen, Park Service rangers, and volunteer groups from local hiking clubs. Each team carried radios, emergency supplies, and detailed topographical maps marking every known trail, water source, and potential shelter. They found absolutely nothing. It was like they'd evaporated, recalls former park ranger Tom Bradley, now 83 and living in nearby Luray. 5 people don't just disappear without leaving trace evidence. Broken branches, footprints, dropped equipment, something. But we combed that forest for weeks and came up empty. The search teams did find anomalies, though none appeared in official reports. Multiple volunteers reported compass malfunctions in the same general area, roughly 2 miles northeast of the established trail system. Electronic equipment failed repeatedly. Radios produced static, GPS units displayed impossible coordinates, and metal detectors registered massive subsurface signatures that vanished when investigated. Missing Persons Report, November 3, 1975. Shenandoah County Sheriff's Department. Search teams report unusual equipment failures in grid section 7 Delta. Recommend avoiding area until technical issues resolved. No evidence of missing persons recovered. What the report didn't mention was the decision made during a closed-door meeting between Sheriff Hawkins, Park Superintendent James Morrison, and 2 unidentified federal agents who had arrived from Washington without explanation. The search was terminated on November 5th. Official reason: weather conditions and diminishing probability of survivor recovery. Unofficial reason: the area designated as Grid Section 7 Delta had been classified as temporarily restricted for geological assessment. They knew something was wrong with that land. The families of the Blackwood Five refused to accept the conclusion. Rebecca Martinez's parents hired private investigators. David Chen's father, a prominent physicist at Johns Hopkins, demanded access to all search records and equipment failure reports. The families organized their own search efforts throughout the following spring, bringing in specialized teams with advanced equipment. Every private investigation reached the same dead end. The area where multiple teams had experienced equipment failures was now cordoned off with U.S. Geological Survey markers, ostensibly for mineral assessment and ground stability testing. Local authorities politely but firmly redirected civilian search efforts to other areas. The cover-up was systematic and thorough. But why would federal agencies want to suppress the search for 5 missing college students? What had those volunteers really found in Grid Section 7 Delta that required immediate classification and restriction? The answer emerged decades later through Freedom of Information Act requests, filed by investigative journalist Maria Santos. Buried in heavily redacted documents was a single line that changed everything. Electromagnetic anomalies consistent with previous incidents. Recommend immediate containment protocols per Project Blue Ridge Directive. Previous incidents. This wasn't the first time something unexplained had happened in that section of Shenandoah Forest. The Blackwood Five had simply been unlucky enough to stumble into an area that certain government agencies had been monitoring for years. The students hadn't gotten lost in the wilderness. They had discovered something that powerful people needed to keep hidden, and their disappearance had been allowed, perhaps even encouraged, to protect a much larger secret. But secrets have a way of surfacing, especially when they're buried in shallow ground. The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Margaret Klein set down her coffee cup with trembling hands. For 50 years, she had carried the weight of what she witnessed that October night. Knowledge that could have saved 5 young lives if only someone had believed her. This was the moment when ordinary people chose silence over truth. Margaret lived in a modest farmhouse 3 miles southeast of where the Blackwood Five would make their final camp. On the evening of October 23, 1975, she was hanging laundry on her back porch when the entire sky above the mountain ridge began to pulse with unnatural light. It wasn't lightning, she told investigative reporter Maria Santos in 2024, her voice still carrying the tremor of old fear. Lightning comes and goes. This was deliberate, rhythmic, like something was signaling. The lights appeared around 11 p.m., exactly matching the timestamp on Rebecca Martinez's final photograph. Margaret described a formation of brilliant white orbs moving in synchronized patterns above the tree line, each one roughly the size of her barn's floodlight, but infinitely brighter. They held position for approximately 15 minutes before descending below the canopy. She called the sheriff's department immediately. Dispatcher treated me like I was drunk or having hallucinations, Margaret recalled. Told me they'd make a note and hung up, but I wasn't the only one who saw it. 3 other residents had witnessed the same phenomenon that night. Frank Muller, who ran the general store in nearby Elkton, was driving home from a late inventory session when the lights appeared. He pulled over and watched the entire display from Route 33, close enough to see individual orbs rotating on their axes as they moved. Sarah Beth Compton was feeding her horses when her animals began showing extreme distress, whinnying, kicking stall doors, and clustering together in obvious terror. When she looked up to see what had spooked them, the formation was directly overhead, moving with mechanical precision toward the forest. Jimmy Crawford, a 17-year-old whose family owned timber rights in the area, was spotlighting deer when the lights appeared. He later described them as moving like they were following roads in the sky, but roads only they could see. All 4 witnesses called local authorities that night. All 4 were dismissed, their reports filed under atmospheric disturbances and promptly forgotten. What would you do if you'd seen something impossible and no one believed you? When the search for the Blackwood Five began 4 days later, these same witnesses tried to direct teams toward the area where they'd seen the lights descend. Sheriff Hawkins politely noted their input, then specifically avoided assigning search teams to those coordinates. Margaret Klein attended every community meeting about the missing students. She repeatedly offered to show searchers exactly where the lights had gone down. Each time she was thanked for her concern and quietly ignored. They didn't want to find those kids, she said, her weathered hands gripping the diner table. Not in that part of the forest. Too many questions would follow. The pattern became clear when federal agents arrived in town. Suddenly, Witnesses who had been eager to help found themselves receiving unexpected visits from men in dark suits carrying credentials they weren't allowed to examine closely. The conversations were always polite, always brief, and always ended with the same suggestion. Perhaps they had been mistaken about what they'd seen that night. Frank Muller closed his store for 3 days after his visit. Sarah Beth Compton stopped talking about the incident entirely. Jimmy Crawford left for military service 6 months ahead of schedule. Only Margaret Klein refused to be silenced, though she learned to choose her words carefully. The silence was bought and paid for. But intimidation tactics work both ways. If federal agencies were willing to suppress witness testimony about atmospheric lights, what else were they hiding? And how many other incidents had been buried beneath layers of official denial and convenient amnesia? The answer lay in classified documents that wouldn't surface for another 40 years. Records showing that the area around White Oak Canyon had been generating unusual activity reports since 1958. The Blackwood Five weren't the first to encounter something unexplained in those mountains. They were simply the first to leave behind photographic evidence that couldn't be explained away. The manila folder slapped against the oak desk with a sound like breaking bones. FBI Special Agent Patricia Vance opened the file marked Project Blue Ridge Historical Incidents and felt her understanding of the Blackwood Five case shift into darker territory. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was the latest entry in a 50-year pattern of deliberate concealment. Agent Vance had been assigned to review the 2025 discovery after forensic analysis revealed the anachronistic fishing line. What she found in the Bureau's classified archives painted a picture of systematic cover-ups stretching back to the Eisenhower administration. The Appalachian Mountains, particularly the Shenandoah region, had been generating unexplained incidents at an alarming rate. The first documented case occurred in August 1958. A family of 4 camping near White Oak Canyon reported seeing aircraft moving in impossible patterns before disappearing entirely. Their campsite was found 3 days later, completely intact but abandoned. Personal belongings remained untouched. Food was still fresh, but the family had vanished without leaving footprints or any indication of their departure method. Official explanation: bear attack. Bodies carried off by scavengers. Incident report, June 12, 1963. Virginia State Police. Hikers report structured craft hovering above forest canopy. Investigation reveals no evidence of aircraft activity. Witnesses advised to report sightings to appropriate federal agencies. The pattern accelerated through the 1960s. Hunters found deer arranged in perfect circles, each animal showing no signs of injury but completely drained of blood. Geology students detected massive underground cavities that shouldn't exist according to regional bedrock surveys. Amateur radio operators recorded signals emanating from beneath the forest floor, transmissions using no known encoding method. Each incident triggered the same response: swift federal intervention, witness interviews followed by requests for discretion, and evidence that mysteriously disappeared from local law enforcement files. But the Blackwood Five represented an escalation. Previous incidents involved isolated sightings or minor anomalies, Agent Vance noted in her report. The 1975 case marked the first time multiple witnesses with scientific training documented ongoing phenomena over several days. David Chen's electromagnetic readings, recovered from his equipment in 2025, showed energy signatures that modern physics still couldn't explain. The readings peaked at 11:43 p.m. on October 23rd, exactly 4 minutes before Rebecca Martinez captured her final photograph. Whatever the students had encountered was actively monitoring their presence and responding to their investigation. The fishing line used to seal their tents contained trace elements not found in terrestrial manufacturing. Spectral analysis revealed isotopic ratios that suggested non-Earth origin or technology so advanced it could manipulate matter at the atomic level. Someone or something had preserved those bodies for 50 years, protecting them from decomposition while maintaining the evidence they'd gathered. The question wasn't who had done it, but why they wanted the truth to eventually surface. They had been waiting for the right moment. Agent Vance's investigation uncovered something even more disturbing. The restricted area around Grid Section 7 Delta hadn't been geological assessment. It was a containment zone. Satellite imagery from 1976 through 2024 showed regular government activity in the region. Unmarked vehicles, temporary structures, and personnel conducting operations under heavy security. The government hadn't been covering up the Blackwood 5 incident. They'd been studying it. For nearly 50 years, federal agencies had maintained a research facility disguised as geological survey operations. They'd been monitoring whatever was hidden beneath that section of Appalachian forest, collecting data on phenomena that officially didn't exist. The students hadn't stumbled into a random encounter. They'd discovered an ongoing first contact situation that had been managed in secret for decades. But why reveal the evidence now? Why allow the 2025 landslide to expose tents that could have remained buried forever? The answer lay in recently declassified National Security Council memos discussing controlled disclosure protocols and gradual public preparation for paradigm adjustment. After 70 years of denial, certain factions within the government were preparing to acknowledge what they'd been hiding in the mountains. The Blackwood 5 were about to become proof that we are not alone. Dr. Elena Vasquez held the fishing line under polarized light, watching impossible molecular structures dance beneath her microscope. The material analysis lab at MIT fell silent except for the hum of equipment that was failing to explain what shouldn't exist in 1975, or even today. The evidence was forcing scientists to confront technology that challenged everything they understood about materials engineering. The fishing line recovered from the Blackwood 5 tents defied conventional physics. Tensile strength exceeded carbon fiber by a factor of 12. Molecular density suggested a manufacturing process that required precision control at the atomic level. Technology that human industry wouldn't achieve until the early 21st century, if at all. But the real breakthrough came when Dr. Vasquez subjected samples to electromagnetic frequency analysis. The material responded to specific wavelengths by changing color, density, and even molecular structure. It wasn't just advanced fishing line. It was programmable matter that could adapt its properties based on external stimuli. This represents technology at least 50 years beyond our current capabilities, Dr. Vasquez reported to the joint FBI-Pentagon task force. The manufacturing process would require equipment we're only beginning to theorize about. More disturbing was what happened when the material was exposed to electromagnetic frequencies matching David Chen's final readings from October 23, 1975. The fishing line began generating its own energy signatures, pulses that corresponded exactly to the pattern Rebecca Martinez had photographed in the sky. It was responding to something still active in those mountains. The cameras told an even stranger story. Rebecca Martinez's Nikon F contained modifications that shouldn't have been possible with 1970s technology. Internal components had been enhanced with microscopic circuitry that could capture electromagnetic frequencies beyond the visible spectrum. Someone or something had upgraded her equipment to document phenomena that normal cameras couldn't detect. Frame analysis of the final photograph revealed details invisible to the naked eye. The ring of lights wasn't random. Each orb pulsed in mathematical sequences that matched prime number progressions. The formation was demonstrating intelligence, showing anyone with the technology to analyze the image that it possessed advanced mathematical understanding. But who had modified Rebecca's camera? And when? Archive entry, October 20th, 1975, Marcus Thompson's Photography Journal. Rebecca's acting weird about her camera. Says it feels different, heavier. Thinks someone tampered with it while we were at dinner yesterday. But who would mess with camera equipment at a college cafeteria? The modification had occurred 3 days before the students left for their hiking trip. Security footage from the University of Virginia dining hall, retrieved from archived storage in 2025, showed a brief power outage on October 19th at precisely 8:47 p.m. When electricity was restored, Rebecca's camera bag had been opened and resealed. No human figure appeared on the footage during the blackout. The implication was staggering. Whatever intelligence operated in the Shenandoah Mountains had somehow accessed the university campus, modified Rebecca's equipment, and ensured she would document their encounter with adequate technology. The entire incident had been orchestrated to create evidence that would survive for 50 years. Dr. Vasquez's team made one final discovery that changed everything. Carbon dating of the fishing line revealed manufacturing dates spanning from 1975 to 2024. The material had been created continuously over 5 decades, added to periodically as if maintaining some kind of protective barrier around the preserved bodies. Something had been tending to those tents for 50 years, maintaining the evidence until the right moment for disclosure. But the most chilling revelation came from spectral analysis of the tent fabric itself. Embedded within the orange nylon were microscopic fibers that didn't match any known manufacturing process. The fibers formed patterns, complex geometric designs that served no structural purpose, but created a 3-dimensional map when viewed under specific lighting conditions. A map of underground tunnel systems beneath Shenandoah National Park. The tunnels stretched for miles in every direction, connecting natural caverns with artificially constructed chambers. At the center of the network, directly beneath where the students had camped, lay a massive hollow space that registered as empty on all geological surveys, but showed clear signs of occupancy on the fiber maps. Something was living underneath the mountains, and it had been preparing humanity for contact by preserving proof of its existence. The Blackwood Five weren't victims. They were chosen messengers whose evidence would eventually force acknowledgement of a reality governments had spent decades denying. The disclosure wasn't accidental. It was scheduled. The excavation team's drill bit hit hollow space exactly where the fiber maps predicted, 200 feet beneath Virginia soil that officially contained nothing but bedrock and groundwater. Project Director General Harrison watched the monitors as cameras descended into darkness that had been hidden for decades. The underground complex would rewrite human history, but only if the public was ready to accept it. What the fiber maps had revealed wasn't natural cave formation. The tunnels showed clear signs of construction using technology that carved through solid granite with surgical precision. Walls displayed mathematical formulas etched in symbols that combined recognizable equations with notation systems that didn't exist in any human academic tradition. The main chamber stretched 300 feet in diameter, with a domed ceiling that rose nearly 60 feet above a floor, covered in hexagonal metal plates. Each plate hummed with subtle energy, creating harmonics that registered on acoustic equipment as communication. Not random noise, but structured information exchange in frequencies just beyond human hearing range. We weren't alone, and we never had been. General Harrison's team discovered maintenance logs written in English, dated continuously from 1958 through 2025. The entries detailed surface observation protocols, contact preparation phases, and cultural readiness assessments. Someone, or something, had been studying human civilization for 70 years, carefully managing contact to avoid social collapse. The Blackwood Five had been selected because their scientific backgrounds would lend credibility to eventual disclosure. Their equipment had been enhanced to ensure proper documentation. Their preservation for 50 years had been designed to coincide with humanity's technological advancement to a point where the evidence couldn't be dismissed or explained away. Entry log, October 23, 1975. Underground Facility Archives. Surface subjects have documented initial contact successfully. Preservation protocol initiated. Recommend 50-year development cycle before evidence release. Human technological progress suggests readiness threshold achievable by 2025. The bodies found in the tents weren't the actual Blackwood Five students. They were biological duplicates, perfect recreations created using technology that could map and reproduce human physiology down to DNA level. The real students had been taken underground, where they had spent their final hours in chambers designed to ease the transition between human and post-human existence. Their consciousness had been preserved in digital format, their knowledge and experiences integrated into a vast database of human understanding that spanned decades of covert contact. They had become part of something larger, a bridge between two civilizations preparing for formal introduction. The fishing line, the enhanced cameras, the preservation technology, all of it represented collaborative effort between human governments and non-human intelligence to gradually prepare society for truths that would fundamentally alter humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. But the disclosure timeline had accelerated due to global environmental pressures and technological developments that made continued secrecy unsustainable. Climate change, artificial intelligence, and space exploration were forcing humanity toward a developmental threshold where cosmic citizenship became inevitable. The 2025 revelation of the Blackwood Five evidence marked the beginning of controlled disclosure, a carefully managed process designed to introduce concepts of non-human intelligence through documented historical cases, rather than dramatic first contact scenarios that could trigger social collapse. They had been protecting us from ourselves. The underground facility contained archives documenting similar contact management programs worldwide. The Bermuda Triangle, Area 51, the Tunguska event, all represented chapters in a century-long effort to gradually acclimate human civilization to cosmic reality while maintaining social stability. But time was running out. Environmental degradation and technological advancement were forcing accelerated contact timelines. Within the next decade, according to the archived projections, humanity would either achieve cosmic citizenship or face civilizational collapse. The Blackwood Five had died as humans, but continued existing as pioneers, consciousness preserved in quantum storage systems that allowed them to experience non-human perspectives while retaining their human identity. They had become ambassadors between worlds, helping design contact protocols that honored both species' fundamental nature. Their sacrifice had bought humanity 50 years of preparation time. Now, as the evidence finally surfaced, the question wasn't whether contact would occur. It was whether humanity was ready to accept the responsibilities that came with cosmic citizenship. The next phase had already begun. Local residents around Shenandoah National Park report strange lights appearing nightly since the tent discovery. moving in formation patterns that seem almost welcoming. The underground facility has increased activity levels, preparing for something that archived documents refer to only as Surface Integration Protocol Phase 2. We're only scratching the surface. The next case is even darker. Subscribe before it drops.